In this lab, we're going to talk more about working with UVs. So I'm providing you with a max file that has a mesh as well as 3 textures. So go ahead and get this folder set up. Make sure it's an actual folder and you're not just opening, clicking on objects in a zip file. I'm going to copy the name of this path, file, open. I'm going to paste that path here and hit enter. And click on that lab UV block and click open. You'll probably get this error about it using a student version. I don't understand why it's coming up. This is a legit educational version, so you can just click OK. So this is what the model looks like if we open the material editor up here. We see our material as it's created. And you can actually see that if I double click on each of these material spheres as well as the textures, they do overlap, but if I come to the material, right click and say Layout Children, that organizes them. So let's double click on the primary material. So effectively the material is already set up for you this time. There's a multi-sub object material and you can see it has the hash marks, meaning it is assigned, right? And then there's the 3 child materials, and those are labeled the strip texture, the wood texture, and the brick. Now those show up here on the object. I specifically went into utilities and used a utility under more called UV remove, and it strips the UVs off of something. So there's actually no UVs on this model currently. So all I need to do is I'm just going to convert this to an edit poly. And once I've done that, I'm going to assign a UVW map. So the UVW map can be found in the modifier list. I set up my modifier sets to actually have it. So as soon as I click, it should show up. And so by default, it's set to plane. So if I go into the gizmo here, I get this planar map and I can move it around. Now I don't want a plane, what I want is a box. And my textures are all square textures, all right? They're 1-to-1 aspect ratio. So I could come in here, and if I find that 2 of my values are the same, which they are, length and width are the same, I can copy that value and paste it into the 3rd one for height. And what that does is that makes my box UV map here, right? My default UVW map box. It basically squares that off. And so now I have a basic clean UV set for my entire model where everything going around it is utilizing that nice clean square set of UVs. This is a good way to get a good basic clean set of UVs. You could even take it, and if I slide it here, I'm going to move it down so that the bottom of this UV box is kind of sitting right here where the break is in my material, so I get a nice little bit of ambient at the bottom. If I hit F4 to see my edges, there we go. I'm going to actually hit lock so I can move it so that yellow line kind of sits right there at the edge. And so now the blocks are kind of sitting there at the bottom. They're a little bit tall here at the top, but we're going to fix that a little bit. All right, this is looking pretty good. I like it. We're going to right-click our model and convert to edit poly. Now we have a clean set of edit poly here. I am in no sub-object. If I click the arrow, you don't see any icons. It's good because now I'm going to click Unwrap UVW. So at this point, we want to go through and we want to do a little bit cleanup on this. Let's do Open UV Editor. And here now we'll start to see our UVs. I can close my material editor. If I hit this, not the little snaps toggle, but the one next to it that zooms out, you can see there's our polygon. Again, I'm going to go into Options Preferences and turn off Selection Preview. I honestly think the person that invented that is a monster. It's a very awful option. I don't know why it exists. All right, but enough about my issues. I'm going to come here to All IDs, and I'm going to click on that at the bottom and go to See Brick. All right, good. So my brick is showing up here. So if I region select, and if I come over here and click to make my viewport active and hit F2, it'll highlight when I have selected. Now, what I want to do is, having these selected, I'm going to hit the Explode button to make sure that only what I have selected is going to move. All right, because if you don't do that, there may be some other aspects of the model that the UVs are still stitched together, and we want to break them apart, which I just did. So I'm going to kind of adjust this top line so it lines up. I could just go into vertex here and grab it and move it. But another way is if I go in and I'm just going to grab all the vertices here in this view. With this little blue offset mode button turned on, I'm going to come to V and I'm going to type in -2 and hit enter, and that should move my UVs down. Now I'm going to just click on this top row and I'm just going to zoom in here. I'm going to raise them up so that they line up with the little gap between the brick. And by doing that, what that does is it makes the model look a little bit more interesting, like it gives a little bit more of that illusion of realism. If I have it sitting in the middle of the brick, I'm sure it's fine. But once you move it so that you get that little bit, you can see the bricks are ending. They're getting a little bit darker at the top because they're kind of disappearing back into that ambient shadowed area. And it makes it feel just a little bit more real. It's just a nice effect to have. All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we are going to start working on our edges. Because what we want to do is we want to make it look like this edge is made of one solid piece, and the lines that are up here wrap around to the side. So we're going to come down here and change it from 3 brick to the 1A strip. And if I come in and in polygon mode, I'm scrolling my middle mouse wheel to zoom out, I'm going to region select to grab all those, and then I'm going to hit explode to break it. So interesting thing you can do is if I click on this display only selected, it'll hide everything else, which is kind of a nice feature to have. So everything still exists, and I can toggle it on and off, right? Of course, I don't have anything selected. But there we go. Now I'll just be focused in on what I actually see. And I have them all selected here. I broke it. I hit explode. Under explode, I hit broke. So now I don't have to worry about accidentally moving anything else. What I'm going to do is I want to get everything to line up. Now, because of the geometric nature of this object, we could do this in a relatively quick fashion. I'm going to introduce a couple tools along the way. So let's region select here. And what I'm doing is I'm just clicking in negative space and dragging so I can grab the 2 sides. I'm going to come over to explode and use break. You'll notice I'm using break a lot because what I'm doing is when I hit break, it creates a UV seam there. So now I can manipulate it without actually moving the wrong things around. And so let's just rotate, right? I'm using the quick transform. I'm going to grab this top row and I'm going to rotate those as well. I'm going to kind of move them down to line them up with each other. All right? So they're kind of roughly sitting on top of each other. Let's grab this row, and I'm just going to lower that down, grab this bottom set and lower them down as well. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here in edge mode. I'm going to click this shared edge between this little trapezoid and the rectangle beneath it, and I'm going to hold Alt, and in this Edit UV window, I'm going to deselect underneath kind of that trapezoid and hit Stitch Custom. And what that does is it takes that, oops, zoomed in a little bit too much there. Use my zoom tool. What it does is it takes this polygon and it moves it up and stitches it. And so we can work our way around our model, selecting edges, deselecting in the Edit UV window and hitting Stitch, and it'll move that geometry together. Right? And so I can just work my way around. I'm always deselecting the bottom, and I use Stitch Custom, which is all the way on the other right. You'll see there's other stitches. They have different uses. I really don't end up ever using any other one except for Stitch Custom because of how it keeps the UV shape. And by deselecting the one at the bottom, it's moving the other geometry up to match the position. You'll notice I can't click on this one here, and that's because by default Ignore Backface is on, but I can turn that off, and now I can select it. And you'll notice when I click, it's actually, it looks like it's getting the bottom. If I click it here, why don't I, just to double check, go into vertex mode and click on this vertex point, and it looks like it's on the bottom. So why don't we take this row and we're going to rotate it so that otherwise if I click on this one and hit stitch, it seemed to work out okay. Maybe we'll just be all right like that. My concern was that the polygons would be flipped upside down, but it looks like it doesn't do that. It looks like it actually rotates the one at the bottom to get it to the proper position. So there we go. So now all those pieces, they're moved so that they're kind of sitting together. And we can kind of grab everything. Let's go into Polygon and do it. And I can move it up. And so now they all kind of have this generic stone, but we want something a little bit more interesting. What if we drag it up here? And see, now we get this nice little seam that wraps around the side. So if we take this and kind of move it over a little bit, see how it looks even more interesting now, because that's kind of in the center. If I grab this point, move it up so I get a little bit of kind of this ambient energy at the top and bottom, look at how much more interesting that is, because you can kind of see that groove kind of going around on each side. This is probably fine as it is. Just to be extra picky about it, we could always grab this top row and align it horizontally, and same with the middle and then the bottom. All right, and so that looks really good. Like, that's kind of what we're looking for. We can turn off our display. Now let's see, let's orbit around, make sure everything's still looking good. I don't know if we want to do anything else with it. We could, if we wanted, we could select what's on the top. Now I can't select that currently because I'm constrained to a strip. If I do all IDs, I can now select the wood at the top and bottom. I like rotate it a little bit. I want to rotate it like 45 degrees or so. But there we go. Now we have UVs, some basic UVs on this box, and that's some pretty common techniques going in and manipulating. You set up a basic set of UVs to tile on something. A lot of times we do what we frame in assets using strip textures. It's a very, very common technique when you're working with environment art, which is something I do all the time at my day job. So there you go. Go ahead and save that, get your snip, and turn in the project.